Hello, everybody. Here is Tatiana Bazzichelli, the director of the Disruption Network Lab, and I'm very happy to welcome everybody here at the conference Evicted by Greed, Global Finance, Housing and Resistance. This conference is investigating how speculative finance drives the housing crisis, and today we are digging into the discourse of counter strategy and resistance. I'm also happy to welcome Lieke Plucher, that is the co-director of the Disruption Network Club, Elena Velianowska and Nada Baker, that work on the production, and Jonas Frankki, that works on the graphic, Steph Lenk on the communication, and Ranav Adhikari on the streaming. So I also thank all the public for being with us. Today will be a great day in which we will try to understand how we can all make a difference by finding tactic strategies of resistance to eviction, and also to understand better how we can fight the real estate business and the global finance that is more and more acquiring the assets of our cities and the everyday life houses in which we live in. So we want to imagine possible intervention and also actions to produce critical knowledge to make resistance to wealth asymmetries as well. Yesterday, we were together with investigative journalists, with people working with data, and also with activists to understand better how this global finance work, in which way these data are hidden, and in which way we can understand how to make possible to uncover the discourse of global finance related to eviction and real estate. And today is a day that will be more political, in the sense that we will really try to understand how to make a change. So we have a long day until 9:15 today that Lieke is going to introduce. But before passing the word to her, I also would like to remember that if people are interested in the talks of yesterday, we also created some video contributes as a Disruption Network Club that are more in-depth editorial talks that you can already watch from our websites. They are also listed from the page of our conference, and you can also access them if you go on the URL disruptionlab.org/evicted-videos. Now I leave the word to Lieke, that will explain exactly better what is happening today and go through the program. And I will come back then to introduce the speakers of today for the first panel. Thank you.
Sorry, let's try that again. So, welcome everybody. I'm Lieke Plucher, and I'm the community director of the Disruption Network Lab. And I also found the mute button now and the unmute button. So I will talk a bit about the program that we have coming up today. So we will start first with the talk about the Deutsche Wohnen & Co. and Eichner initiative. And this will be with Volkan Sayman, moderated by Ella Kagel of Supermarkt. And then we will follow with the keynote on how to secure housing as a human right, with Leilani Farha and Justus von Daniels. And then we have the premiere of a short film that was made specifically for this conference from the Steal This Poster Collective. And this film is called Artivism and the Lucha e Siesta. And it's about the Lucha e Siesta squad in Rome. So we're very excited to have the premiere of this film today, starting from 7:10. And finally, we close off with the panel Subvertising and Fighting Tech Domination, Resisting Speculation, with Jonathan Miller of Berlin versus Amazon, Marco Clausen, co-founder of the Prinzessinnengarten and the Steal This Poster Collective. And also, of course, to mention that we will have another program tomorrow. So we close tomorrow with the Evicted by Greed program with a special tour. This is an online city tour called Visiting the Invisible, a Berlin city tour to anonymous and aggressive real estate investors. And this will be with Christoph Trautvetter, who also gave a talk yesterday. at our conference, and it will start from 5 p.m. at the same place of today. So then of course today you can also join us and participate via the chat, and you can ask questions during the talks. And Tatiana will also explain a bit more about how it works later on. And before we go on with the first talk, I want to also thank all of our funders and partners that made this event possible. So first of all, our cooperation partner, Transparency International, that we work together with. And then our funders, which are first of all the Senate Department for Culture and Europe from Berlin, the Riva and David Logan Foundation, the Bundeszentrale für politische Bildung, and the Checkpoint Charlie Foundation. And we've also been supported by a grant from the Foundation Open Society Institute in cooperation with OSIFE of the Open Society Foundations. And this conference also forms part of the Reimagine Europe project, which is co-funded by the Creative Europe program of the European Union. Then we would also like to mention our knowledge partners, which are the Netzwerk Steuergerechtigkeit and the Hermes Center for Transparency and Digital Human Rights. And for the city tour that I mentioned that's happening tomorrow, we did it in partnership with the Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung, so also many thanks to them, and to the Guerrilla Foundation that is supporting our activation community program. And finally, we also want to thank our media partners, Taz, die Tageszeitung, Furtherfield, and Ex-Berliner. So back to you, Tatiana.
Thank you very much, Lieke, and also I want to thank all the supporters from my side. And now we enter into the first event of today, together with Ella Kagel and Volkan Simon. So thanks for being here, both of you. I will first introduce Ella, that has been also co-operator of the Disruption Lab since a very long time, and also a friend, I have to say, because we share a lot in this city together in the field of art and technology, on project spaces. So I think we have also an history together of resistance. At the same time, as Lieke was saying, I would like to introduce the chat. This is important to understand for the people that are following us. There is a chat on our website where you can write your comments, write your resources, and share the activities you are doing. And most important, also to ask questions. So while we are speaking all together, you are free to interact in the chat. We have also a moderator from our side, that is Steph Lenk. She will answer to you on the questions you have, and then she will pose the questions to us in the panel, and Volkan and Ella will be answering live. So start already, think about your question, because there is also this moment of interaction. And now I want to introduce Ella properly. Then she's going to introduce Volkan. So Ella is the founder of Supermarkt Berlin, that is a space working at the intersection of society, technology, and also economy. She founded Supermarkt in 2010, and the Supermarkt became a very important place in town, bringing together digital culture and also collaborative economy. They always do very interesting initiatives, workshops, conferences, and is also a hub in which people can meet and share information about these topics that are also very important in the city, I would say. She also worked in the past as curator at Transmediale Festival between 2009 and 2011. And also she is a board member of Rechain Europe, that is a technology cooperative based in Berlin. So Ella, I'm very happy to pass the word to you to introduce the panel of today that, as Lieke was saying, is called Expropriate Deutsche Wohnen und Co. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tatiana, for the great introduction. And hi, everybody. I'm super glad to be here and to start the second day of the conference. And let me please introduce Volkan Simon. So Volkan is a sociologist, and he works at the Technical University in Berlin. His main strands of research are autonomous cars and their impact on public life and public space. And the second research strand he's following is, I guess, closely linked to Expropriate Deutsche Wohnen und Co. And that has to do with social coordination at scale and organizing democracy among people. So Volkan is supporting Deutsche Wohnen und Co. enteignen, Expropriate Deutsche Wohnen und Co. because it's a very powerful campaign that uses direct democracy to represent tenants' rights. And before he starts, let me just give a bit of context about Deutsche Wohnen und Co. and what makes them so special or infamous in the German housing landscape. So Deutsche Wohnen und Co. is a housing company, and they own around 150,000 flats and retail spaces, of which more than 70% are situated in Berlin. And they made really negative headlines over the past years by either neglecting or running down their own apartments, exposing the tenants to miserable conditions and just waiting until they would move out. And then another strategy that we see very often is renovating space and setting up new rent contracts with new tenants at a maximum price that is far from the original price that was put on the market. So Deutsche Wohnen und Co. aims at creating a referendum where basically assets that are in the hands of corporate landlords that own more than 3,000 apartments are being put back into the hands of people that will then manage these houses and flats by themselves. So Volkan is going to tell us more about Expropriate Deutsche Wohnen und Co. and he will share his ideas on how this might become a reality. Volkan, passing it on to you.
Yeah, thank you for the introductions and also for being invited to this very nice event. I want to say just a few things about what we do, why we do it, and how we do what we do. It's not very much. I think you know a lot already if you watched the other streams and the other talks. So we are a group, an initiative, which is a collaboration between different housing activist groups in this city, and we don't have any party or affiliation and so on. So it's a broad coalition, and this makes us very strong. We try to use direct democracy, and in particular Article 15 of the German Constitution, which was never used in the history of Germany, to expropriate the big landlords in Berlin. Every landlord who owns more than 3,000 flats and is profit-oriented will be expropriated according to our suggestion. This is what we want to do. We want to expropriate them. We want to transfer their assets to a public body and compensate them under the market value, because the valuation of these flats now is a fantastic thing. It's not a real valuation based on the real worth of these flats. And this is speculation, and this is also why we don't want to compensate these companies with the worth of speculation. So what are the main driving forces? I think if you go through the city with open eyes, you will see that this city has changed in the last years a lot. We have people moving to Berlin, around 30 to 50,000 people coming to Berlin every year. This city growing every year in this rate. We have privatization of big social housing units in the 90s, done by left governments to repay debts, which is a silly idea, but they did that. They sold more than 200,000 flats, which were social housing flats. We have a financialisation, which means that the companies owning these flats today are listed companies, so you can invest in these companies, which makes housing a commodity on the financial market, and which transfers the pressure of generating profit to our local neighborhoods, which makes us even be forced to leave our houses and so on. You all know that, or just not to find a decent place to live in. These are the consequences. We also have an uneven rise in rents and incomes in the last years. People have to pay much higher rents than in 2008 and 2018, but the incomes are not rising in the same speed. Just to give you a number, rents rising 40% between 2008 and 2018 in Berlin, and incomes rising with 20%. So who is supposed to pay that? We don't know, and we don't want this to be like that. So yeah, now one could say, okay, expropriation, it's a funny idea, but completely utopian. It's not realistic. Why do you do that? We say, no, it's not unrealistic. It's not a funny idea. We don't do this for the sake of doing it. We do it because we think it's realistic. It's a policy option that we propose, and a policy option that has already had an effect on housing with the rent cap, for example. This is what we think. We think that this can become a real thing if we do. If we stick to the issue of expropriation within our campaign and do not connect it to too much different things. We are a campaign for the expropriation of housing units. We think that it can become real if we build broad coalitions also to politics, which means that being an activist does not exclude to have connections to politics, to sit with politicians at a table and to discuss things. Also with the real estate industry, I did discussions with the CEO of Deutsche Wohnen and so on. This is nothing we think is impossible, but we know who is our opponent, and we think strategically and tactically in these terms. This is what we do, and another thing why it is a realistic suggestion, we think, is that we don't want these flats to be nationalized. We want them to be socialized. This is a difference. We don't want a big state actor to be created out of this expropriation process. We want a public body to be generated, and this public body owns these flats if they become expropriated, and this public body will be managed transparently, democratically, and by the tenants themselves. And this is a big difference to nationalization, which often results in a very intransparent body, state body, with corruption and so on and so on. And this is also what we don't want to happen. Yeah. Let me give a last word. What are we doing? We are connecting people. We are empowering people in their neighborhoods to connect to their neighbors. We are informing people about their rights as tenants. We are empowering people to stand up against anonymous big financial players, which they don't know, which they cannot identify mostly, and which they cannot talk to. And if you are faced with someone you cannot talk to, you have to create your own voice and make it heard. And this is what we do. So we are organizing people in several neighborhoods all around the city. We try to activate them. We are organizing demonstrations. We are collecting signatures for the next step of the referendum. We are doing lots of media work, which I'm doing now. We are trying to connect with other organizations, trade unions, parties, the left and the Greens, and so on and so on. So we are a big hub for connections. We are a network which consists of networks and which is also connecting to other networks. And this makes us strong. And in the end, we want to create a public body which manages public property as a common good. And this is what we propose. We want a big player on the housing market in Berlin, which works like that. And this is not existing yet, and it has never existed before. And we think that this is a good idea. So far from me. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Volkan. I think it's highly interesting, not only because, of this direct response that you're proposing to the housing crisis and also to achieving social justice in that field, but also you are introducing terms that I would say are maybe not as common in our culture, and probably also not in cultures where, all over Europe or globally. So what I mean especially is the term expropriation or common good, because it seems to me that, over the past decades, we have been living in a time of economic growth, and maybe these factors have not been so widely discussed as they start to be introduced these days. So last year, when Kevin Kühnert, a German politician, sort of dropped the idea of expropriating large companies that are basically uncontrollable and dominate public infrastructure, then there was this huge outcry all over Germany. And people they just had to digest that a politician was actually proposing something like that. So I'm wondering, also with relation to common good, what do you think? What does it really take to change people's mindset to make this campaign successful?
Yeah.
What is your starting
question.
point?
Yeah, that's a good question, because for suggestions, stressing common good, stressing the social dimension of housing, for example, and so on, they get a bad image in the public because they are connected to socialism, to communism, and that's the big fear of the conservatives. And I think we managed quite well to place this idea as a legitimate idea, because we do not waste our time with discussions about socialism or communism. Is this the dawn of communism in Germany? It's not. Of course it's not. And this is a wrong discussion. Everyone who suggests that this discussion is relevant is stupid, actually, is simply stupid. It doesn't make any sense. We propose one policy option on one field, and this is housing. And people understand that. People are so distressed from the housing market that they understand us putting this on the table as a strategic option to discuss more radical measures on the housing market. And this is understood by lots of people, not only the left and well-educated and so on. This is understood by a lot of people. This is even understood by the AfD voters who, according to polls, support us, a majority of them, because they understand what we try to do. And this is one thing about the media discourse and culture of common good. I think we were very successful in cultivating this term in the media landscape, and this is one big success of our campaign. Yes, of course, Kevin Kühnert and all this is also in this thing. Kevin Kühnert is the leader of a social democratic youth organization. So I don't wonder about someone like this proposing a social measure. It is ridiculous to be surprised by that. Yes, we had a phase of growth in Germany, but as you can see, real incomes in Germany are not rising. And this puts forward the question: who is profiting from this phase of growth? It's not the average people.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks a lot. My next question is that while I fully agree, the term really seems to become more and more popular, expropriation, in the media landscape, and I also see that the campaign has been super successful in mobilizing people. But looking at local politics in Berlin, it doesn't seem to be that successful, because you have really managed to hand in, I think, more than 70,000 signatures from people supporting the campaign, right? But the Senate has not really responded to it so far. So they seem to drag on any decision making around the referendum. What has been your recent experience around that, and where does the campaign currently stand?
Yeah. So to have a referendum in Berlin means to go through 3 stages. The first stage is collecting 20,000 signatures. If you succeed with that, and we did that, as you said, we had 77,000, much more than we had to hand in. Then you go to the second stage, and between the first stage and the second stage, this referendum will be checked if the proposition of your referendum is okay according to legal and constitutional paragraphs. So, and we're stuck in this phase because there's the SPD in Berlin, which tries to block us by checking the legal feasibility of our referendum for a long time now, since 9 months. And the Green Party and the Left Party are supporting us, but they're also in a coalition, so they have their own power games within this coalition. But nevertheless, they support us, they give us infrastructural support and so on, and they try to pressure the SPD with us. And this is the current situation, and now we are being somehow invited to talk with the coalition. This is taking place right now. We are preparing that because the SPD wants us to change the text of our proposition. This is what we understood, and I cannot talk about more details because it's going on in the back doors or back rooms now. But we try to negotiate with them to put forward this referendum, because this is what we want. We don't, and this is even a non-binding referendum. So if we succeed in the end in the third step and have the majority of Berliners voting for expropriation, this does not mean anything. It's just a non-binding referendum, and politics is not forced to do anything with that.
Volkan, I would like to ask you, before we open up for questions in the chat, I'm really curious, because mobilizing so many people is in and of itself, it's a great task. So how did the recent COVID-19 pandemic impact your work? And how did you still manage to continue your campaign?
Yeah, it's difficult because we use public space, and we use gatherings with people to organize, and this is all impossible right now, which makes our work very hard. So we're also meeting in Zoom meetings. We have our plenary sessions in Zoom meetings and so on. Of course, this is all good to have, but it's not what makes us strong. And we planned a big demonstration in March, which was then postponed, and all this online stuff. It's good, but also this, of course, it's great, but it's not what it's about. It's about meeting people, being physically together, being face to face. And so we try to do what we can to do it online, and the rest we wait for COVID-19 pandemics and restrictions to be to be something of the past. Yeah, this is what we do right now.
Okay, thank you. I think we are ready now for taking questions from the chat.
Yes, here I am, and there are 3 questions. So the first question was interested in the process of the referendum and the collection of the signatures. This person is asking that they read that recently they filed a suit against the Berlin Senate for inaction after collecting so many signatures. And so they would like to know a bit more about the next steps for this campaign and what are you going to do now and how does it work with this suit. Then the second is, do you have a legal team in the group and do you have an idea how long will the process take? And the third one, have you had personal interaction with Deutsche Wohnen officials or leaders regarding your campaign?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Want to start with a lawsuit first?
Yeah. So as I said, between the first phase of a referendum and the second phase, the coalitions, the leading government coalitions, have to check the feasibility, the legal feasibility of this proposition, and they can take their time. There is no limit to check this. There are some referendums which are on their table since years, and this is how Berlin is coping with direct democracy in a not very nice way. But Bavaria is doing better. They have, for example, they limit the time in which this checking can take place. But in Berlin, it's not like that, and so we wait and wait and wait. And this is also why we filed this suit, this lawsuit. It's a very normal thing if the administration takes too much time and remains passive, and you expect them to be active. You can do this legal step, and this is what we do, of course. It's nothing surprising. And the second thing is, this is done by the legal group in our group. Yes, we have some people who know about the legal stuff very well, who also have experience with other referendums from the past in Berlin, and they proposed to the plenary to take these legal steps against the administration, and this was then voted by majority by the plenary, and so we did that. Yeah, and it's very useful to have these guys and in our campaign, of course. The interaction question, yes, I had a discussion in a conservative newspaper forum in Berlin last year with Michael Zahn, the CEO of Deutsche Wohnen. Of course, they try to present themselves as as a company which cares for Berlin and which cares for the tenants, and they want a dialogue and so on. So it's always a bit tricky to talk to them on such a forum, because of course they want to be seen as a dialogue oriented, but they are not. Yes, we talked there, we had a discussion, it was okay, there was media coverage and so on. And yeah, I think this does not change anything, such a discussion. It's just a discussion, but it shows that we are able to talk with these people at one table. It shows that we are not some activists throwing Molotov cocktails and so on, which is not the case, which is not what we're organizing. Yeah.
I can also say there is still 2 questions that just came out now. One is, how can we support the campaign? The other is, do you work on a proposal on how the organism that should take over Deutsche Wohnen should work as a governance scheme or as a strategy for the fair management of the housing stock? And I have also a question from myself, because you were mentioning that, of course, it's good to meet physically and do action for real when we are speaking about this topic. And I totally agree with you. We planned this conference to happen at the end of March. That was exactly the same weekend in which the big demonstration was going to happen in Berlin against eviction. And this unfortunately didn't happen for us, it didn't happen for them. That is why now we are doing this conference online. But speaking about that, I think in a sense was a real pity, because there were a lot of organizations in Berlin that were supposed to meet and do actions during that demonstration. And I wanted to ask if in support of your campaign, you are also coordinating with other organizations in Berlin that are also fighting eviction. We know there are a lot of groups. We also ran a community workshop in the past before this conference with some of them. So in the question, I would attach this to the first question, how can we support the campaign? Because I think in Berlin there are also many groups that are with you, they are fighting on the same subjects. And so I wonder how you are coordinating with them. So this, if you would like to answer.
Yeah. So the first question, the public body we imagine or we try to describe, it is one group in our campaign which is only doing this work of imagining the future of this Anstalt öffentlichen Rechts, we call it in German, public body. And there is a document, a big document, very detailed, describing this imagined future. And this document is unfortunately only published in German. But if you speak German, you can find it and you can read it, and you will find very much details about how we imagine this public body on 20 pages on our website. Yeah. So, yeah, how can you participate? You can just write us a mail and go to our website and write us a mail and say, hey, I'm interested in this organization. I want to take part. Our plenary sessions are free. If you take part twice, you are eligible to vote. If you go on the email newsletters, you will always be informed. If you go to the plenaries, you will take part. You will find easily people who introduce you into one working group, and then you can take part in it. And it's the nice thing about it, you can do everything. You can do the media coverage, you can design flyers, you can organize with other tenant organizations, you can do the grassroots organization and so on. So there are lots of tasks and lots of different people can take part in it. And lots of different people are taking part, which is also a nice thing actually. Old people, young people, men, women, whatever. So this is a good thing. Yes, and of course, we are not something new. Actually, we are a composition of actors in Berlin which already existed, and so we have very good connections to all kinds of organizations in Berlin. May it be the Mietenwahnsinn-Bündnis, which is also again a coalition, and they organize the demonstrations. May it be the Left Party, we have good connections to them. The Green Party, we have good connections to them. But these connections were not created at once. These are grown connections in this city, which we use to push this referendum. Yeah.
Okay.
I can say there is an additional question that just came up, and then Ella, would be nice if you can also answer and give your feedback to what Volkan already mentioned. This question says, how would the expropriation be carried out? Would companies get some kind of compensation, and would some kind of cooperative take over the properties?
Yeah, of course. You cannot expropriate on legally without a compensation, and this is a very important question. And we have produced a document where we show different ways to calculate the compensation. So you can compensate symbolically. You can give them €1 and take the property. It's possible, but this is not what most people in our organization want. We want a compensation based, and this is quite difficult to tell you now, you can read it, but we want a compensation which is based on fair rents. So the calculation of this compensation is not based on a speculative worth of the flats. It is based on what the flats would be valued like if they would be if they were rented as on a fair price. So this is something different. The Deutsche Wohnen and all the other companies, they value their assets based on a speculative worth and 20 or even 30 times the worth they have right now. And this is not how we would calculate this compensation, because it's silly. Yeah.
Ella, would you
Because
like
if
to
we
follow up?
Yeah, it's I have so many questions, and because I really find this topic super interesting, because there are so many different components to it. There's the social coordination and how it's organized. I think it's super interesting, not only on a national but also international level, because I'm sure there are other groups in other countries that might work on similar campaigns. But also for me, and this is what I would like to come back to maybe towards the end of our conversation. It's the narrative, right? And it's also the way how this discussion is being carried out, because we can discuss that on a political level. We can discuss it on a meta level where we talk about governance concepts. But let's maybe bring it down to a very basic level of human rights, because that's basically what this whole discussion, in my understanding, is all about. And I think that one of your basic arguments is that living is a basic need, right? And it's indispensable in every respect for being human. And I sometimes really wonder where this argument is, in this entire debate around rent prices and housing, because all the arguments are merely political or economical. But what about this component, and how do you try to sort of reintroduce that to the public discourse?
Yeah. So it's not so easy question, because if you want to bring into the debate the very essential point that housing is a human right, you cannot do it only by saying that housing is a human right. Of course you can do that, but this will not be so interesting for lots of people. So how to make it interesting to say that this is a human right? This is the question, actually. And we think, what we do is to create a consciousness that the current situation, how housing is managed, is not at all taking care of human rights. So if you look at how it is organized right now, it is not at all based on the value of saying that housing is a human right. So first of all, to make this human right argument more popular, you have to show that the current situation has nothing to do with human rights. And this is how people may approach this kind of thinking about housing as a human right. If they are conscious about how we organize this very, very important good in a privatized way and even in a financialized way. And yes, and this is the opposite of human rights. I think this is you have to do it very contrastive. You have to create the contrast between human rights and housing and not human rights and housing. And if you succeed with that, and we succeed with that, this is, of course, implies some kind of populist argumentation also. This also implies to be very clear, to be not to talk too much about this and that and all is complicated. No, it's not that complicated. If you want to see it, if you want to make an argument for housing as a human right, then it's not that complicated. It's not that complex. And if you spread this kind of message, people understand that.
I really think that's also what makes a campaign so interesting, but also so complex, right? Because you really have to play on many different levels, and also on the level of reintroducing a narrative and terms that people are not necessarily confronted with every day. And I think that's a great piece of work to do that. I'm also interested, maybe just as a last question, unless there are more questions coming up in the chat, but I noticed that some people asked about the cooperative model, because we touched on a little bit about the governance structure of the public company that would then basically steer all these housing assets. And the first thing that comes to people's minds is the model of a cooperative. So can you quickly maybe wrap up in what ways your governance model differs from a cooperative, or maybe is it a cooperative model? Just give us a few hints on how this might look like.
I think it has some differences in relation to the cooperative model, because our public campaign would be huge. It would have lots of power. It would have more than 200,000 flats out of 1.9 million flats in Berlin, which is more than 10%. So it would be very difficult to have this organized by some kind of cooperatives model, which would be nearly impossible, I guess. What we propose is a subsidiary style of organization. So what can be managed on the local level, on the most local level, should be managed on the most local level. And the things which are difficult or impossible to manage on the local level, they can be managed on a level higher than the local one. And so what we propose are some councils, tenants councils, on a house scale, on a regional scale or Keats scale, and on a scale of the whole public body. And these tenants councils will consist of tenants who are voted by other tenants to represent their interests in the public body. And these tenants councils are one element. There's also a board of directors, and this board of directors will have a majority of tenants from the tenants council, so they are voted directly. They will have representatives from the state, from the city society, which will also be voted directly, and they will also have employees within the public body. So the board of directors, which will take the most important decisions inside of this public body, will have a majority of representatives from the city, of tenants, and from employees in this public body in relation to politicians. And politicians will also be in the board of directors, but they will be in the minority. This is what we propose.
Okay, Volkan.
Yeah.
I think now it's, I know we could go on for a really long time. It's been super interesting. Thank you so much. Good luck to the campaign. And thanks everybody for watching our talk. And I think we
Thanks for
reached the
having
end
us.
of our slot.
Yes, I also want to thank the both of you and mention also two things. One is that we are planning an encounter of physical bodies as well on July the 30th. We want to show a film Push that we also discussed yesterday from Frederick Gerten. And so there will be the possibility to meet all together and also discuss these topics the 30th of July at ACUD. And at the same time, since we were mentioning the discourse of human rights related to eviction, I also would like to take the occasion to announce what is happening after this talk. At 5, we will come back for the human rights solution tackling the housing crisis, together with Leilani Farah, that is the global director of the Shift, and was also the UN Special Rapporteur on the right to housing, moderated by Justus von Daniels from Corrective. So there we will really discuss how the discourse of eviction can become a human right. So I would like to welcome everybody to come back at 5. And then most of all, I want to thank all of you that have been listening, and Ella and Volkan for this great discussion. Thank you very much, and keep the fight going. That is really important. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.